We have now launched the online Shockwave course. When I set the company up, which is over 12 years ago now, which is hard to believe, I was always about educating the clinicians as well, not just in terms of the technology. So when Dom Smith came to me with this idea of doing the Shockwave course, I was all for it. And Dom and Katie have done a fantastic job of putting it together. It's really impressive, really comprehensive. It is technology agnostic, so whatever system you're using will be able to help you with this. So it's a brilliant piece of work. The guys have done really well. So check it out and go to the link below and let us know what you think.
Hello. Today I am joined by Ben Cormack, who is owner at Core Kinetic and also co-founder at the Better Clinician Project. So Ben, how are you doing?
I am very well, Andy. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and have a chat.
Hey, pleasure. And I'm slightly intimidated by that microphone there. That sort of makes it seem like you're. Yeah, I know you're a real pro of these things anyway, but I'm looking forward to it.
It's all smoke and mirrors. It's an illusion. It's an illusion of technology.
Yeah, well, it sounds clear anyway, so it's working. Whatever it is, it's working. So where are you speaking from today?
So I am in the Garden of England, down in Kent on the Kent coast. So a little place called Ramsgate.
Yeah, and how's the weather down there?
I think it's probably much the same as everywhere else in the UK. A little bit grey, a little bit cold. Although I do like to wind people up and say down in the south, it's permanently 30 degrees, palm trees, that kind of stuff.
It genuinely is normally quite a bit warmer though. Like I'm down there quite a lot, and it's like trying to prepare for getting the train from Manchester or Stockport and then getting to London. It's like it is a bit frustrating.
Yeah, no, I do think we have a small temperature edge, but not too much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, exactly. I'm glad to hear that anyway. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about you. I see your stuff online. I'm aware of you via Adam, and so on. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what's made you who you are and what drives you to what you're doing. So where are you from, and what prompted you to move into this area?
So I'm a Londoner. I'm the last of a dying breed, the proper Londoner. Although, like a lot of other Londoners, I've kind of moved out over the years. So yeah, it just all got too busy and hectic and stressful and expensive. So I kind of went for a more chilled out vibe. So look, I think I would call myself these days. Obviously, I started out working clinically. I used to work in central London for many years, just behind Oxford Street, which was always pretty cool to kind of to be involved and around that area, and with the movers and the shakers. But I'd probably call myself a bit more an educator in this day and age. So about 15 years ago, 2010, I think it was, I set up Core Kinetic. And that is my kind of educational company. And one of the things I always say when I teach is I'm much better at teaching than I ever was any of the clinical stuff. And I think there's that saying, isn't that those that can't do it teach. So I think that fits me down to the ground. But it's something that the teaching side of it is always something that I've really enjoyed. I've always felt that I like to take some of this complex stuff and try and make it a little more digestible, a little simpler. Maybe that's easy when you do it in a hard Cockney accent. I don't know. And then more recently, I think that I've moved a little bit more into kind of, I don't know what you describe it as, maybe kind of online education or educational platforms. Obviously, myself and Adam Meekins, who people may or may not have heard of, he's quite a shy character, likes to be in the background. We set up something called the Better Clinician Project back in 2019, right at the very end, just before the pandemic. We launched actually February 2020, and we moved into a little bit more of a kind of an educational space that wasn't live education, more an educational platform. And I'd like to think we've done really well with that. I think we're one of the most well-known kind of online physio rehab kind of platforms now. And I've learned a lot more about the business side of it over the last 5 or 6 years. And that's also something that I've enjoyed doing as well.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to pick out there. So I'll come back to that business piece because I think that's really interesting for a lot of the people that do watch and listen to this is maybe someone that runs their own business, and I think that is it's a massive skill set that is probably it's not really well catered for in this industry. So just going back to what you said there in terms of why do you think you make a better educator than clinician?
No, I don't know. I think more than anything, I think I found that I enjoy it more. I think, when you work, I think I probably worked for about, at least 10 years clinically, morning till night, sometimes very early morning till sometimes quite late at night, like a lot of other, people in the health and fitness industry and the health and rehab industry. And I think that you get to a point whereby, doing other things is enjoyable, exploring other things is enjoyable. And it's far easier to talk about it than do it, I think. But it's just something that I think really kind of that's something that I've really found a passion for. Although, just to point out, I still do clinical stuff, and I enjoy that more actually the less I do of it. When you do any one thing a lot, sometimes it can become quite tiring. Maybe you get a little burnt out with it, and I think variety very much is the spice of life.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that one. And then so what made you get into the world of physio?
So my background was sports therapy, and what made me get into that? Well, actually saying that, so I always played sport, and I always was involved. In fact, my sport is boxing, something I've been involved with boxing since I was a kid and various boxing clubs and stuff like that. And when I was about 17, 18, I was quite lost with where I was going in the world. And someone suggested me to go down that kind of road and that kind of route. And that's kind of it. It was never a burning thing for me from my I was 5 years old. It was very much actually, I think when I was about 18, I was at a bit of a loss to what to study and what to do. And that's something that I kind of ended up going down. So I think most things in my life have been quite organic in that sense. I don't think I've ever had a massive plan about what to do and how to do it. I think very much it's been kind of, let's give that a go, see what happens. If it works, that's great. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. And I think so far things have kind of worked out okay. But who knows what's around the corner tomorrow.
Yeah, well, I can definitely empathize with that just natural, organic process of the way things happen, which some people you speak to and it's like, yeah, I wanted to do that, always going to do it, blah, blah, blah. But so sometimes you just don't know, do you? You don't know how you get into something. And so that sports therapy then. So what was it about then? I guess it's been not been around that long. I work with a lot. We've got a couple of sports therapists who work for us. But like, what made that the course that you wanted to do once you decided roughly the area?
Yeah, because I think it was the sports element that appealed to me. And over the years, and I've worked for various, sports organisations and clubs and these type of things. And I think I kind of realised that maybe I didn't enjoy sports and that being on that side of the sports as much as I kind of thought I would. And then what I did after that was I just kind of did more general kind of one-to-one type of stuff rather than working for sports teams. I don't think that was ever going to be my journey, but I think that it was the sports aspect that I think really appealed to me at the time. And I think some people get into the sports side of stuff and stay there and love it and go from team to team and do all these kind of things. And that wasn't really that wasn't really my path actually. And I worked out quite early on that I was meant to be a bit more of a solo practitioner, probably because I have a terrible detest of authority and these type of things. I think you work out, don't you, that you're meant to be a bit more entrepreneurial. You're meant to fit into like a working team environment, and I think I'm a little more entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I know that's interesting. It's definitely different skill sets, even though the same qualification and so on, but there's a lot of different paths for it. I mean, one of the things I do think is interesting is like you talk about sport, and everyone, certainly in this country, football's massive, but people always associate whether it's sports therapy, physio, it's like, all right, it's that elite level sport. Whereas we've got an aging population. There's a lot of changes that are out there now. So it's how do we cater and develop? I think, and again, with the project that you've got going on, how do we create that clinician that is educated to know, well, just because they don't play semi-pro football or whatever it is, everyone plays semi-pro football these days, don't they? It's like it's everyone. There's a lot of those people. How do we how do we cater for the whole country, the whole population? Because I think there's a lot more awareness of that now.
Yeah, well, I think sports science is probably quite similar in the sense that there aren't, if you look at it from a traditional sports environment, there probably aren't actually that many jobs. If we're being really, really honest, that's why a lot of people may diversify and come out and do, go into other areas. But there is only a finite number of sports teams that can actually pay people. So, I think there's all of this knowledge and all of this resource. And I think, how do we steer that into different areas? And one of the things that I think is great at the moment is that, people like Connect Health and the NHS are kind of recognizing that. They're bringing in sports rehabilitators, they're bringing in sports therapists, osteopaths, all of these other resources to use in that kind of musculoskeletal world as well. And I'd really like to see that expansion into how do we, use that kind of resource in a wider, broader sense, even though your knowledge may be originally around sports and sports injury. So much crossover with all of the MSK stuff, so much crossover with health, so much crossover with all of those type of things that you were talking about there with aging populations and, creating more roles and more opportunities for people. And I think the Better Clinician Project was very much about how do we bring wider, broader education to any clinicians that would like to join up. And we've got chiros, osteos, physios, sports therapists, sports rehabilitators, personal trainers, everyone across the board. And that was our whole idea, was to bring really, really good quality education to this kind of broad MSK area.
Yeah, no, it's really good, and I think it is just really valuable, and it's important having people that have got a good profile as well to push this out there. So just before we go into that project, like setting Core Kinetic up, what was your mission at that point?
Yeah, so what I had at that time was, even though I was a solo kind of practitioner, I had other people around me that we weren't a team per se, but we were all people that were working in an environment together, even though we were our own businesses. And you find that a lot in the West End. You have a lot of spaces with a lot of solo practitioners, and you're sort of a team and you're sort of not a team, if that makes sense. Your finances aren't shared, but your working space is shared. And I think people always used to come to me and say, Ben, can you help me understand this? Or, I've always had a passion for knowledge, and can you help me understand? And they liked the way that I explained it. And then someone said to me one day, well, have you ever thought about teaching a course? Have you ever thought about doing it at a scale? And I thought, yes, let's give that a go. My first course, I had 25 people. All of them I knew. The next course, I had about 3 people, none of them I knew. So I think it was just this kind of, breaking out into a new area. And in the beginning, I think the knowledge is the key. And then as you move forward, you find out a little bit more that it's not just the knowledge, it's the business that's the key as well. So expanding Core Kinetic into something more also makes you understand a little bit more about the business of education, not just the education of education.
So you mean your understanding of how the business works and how to make it an entity?
Yeah, absolutely. So the original drive, I think, was that I enjoyed the teaching. Maybe it was boosting my fragile ego, I don't know. But at the same time, I think the thing that's underpinned it has been growing in different areas, and that's actually been a bit of a drive for me as well. It's just been, I like to make a success of things I put an effort into, and and learning about all of the other skills that you need to run a business around education, I think has also spurred me on, and I'd say probably interests me the most, these days, that over the last 25 years or 20 years or whatever, I suppose there's only a finite amount of new clinical knowledge you can learn sometimes.
Yeah. So what are the things that you think would be beneficial for the wider clinical population?
From a business perspective or an educational perspective?
I think really across the board, really, which maybe is if you can break it down however you want to, but I think there's definitely things like we were saying before that clinically there's a lot of content out there. You obviously got the degree when people are coming through on that side of it. But from my conversations and my time in the industry is that there's a lot of other skills out there that aren't being taught, the business being one of them, but then other things in terms of, like, I had James Calder on here the other week, and he was saying that he doesn't think he would get on a course now. He also says that undervaluing just the general human skills are also is massively there as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so look, I think probably part of my appeal as an educator, and I would like to say that I've been reasonably successful at doing it. I'm certainly reasonably well known without sounding too arrogant. But I think that one of the things that I think both me and Adam do is we come at it from a very normal bloke on the street type of perspective. We're not highfalutin academics. We are just, your average clinician, and we take some really complex stuff sometimes and we fudge our way through it, and we make some mistakes, and we're honest about it, and we have a laugh. And so I think if I was to break down one skill set that I think I have and I think can be important as well, is to take some complex academic stuff and make it more easily understandable. So I've written some quite complex, almost intellectual masturbation. That's how I describe some of the papers that I've written, because they're not easy reads, they're quite philosophically complex. But when I actually go and teach some of these constructs, things like the biopsychosocial model, for example, which is all human skills, that is very much about kind of breaking it down into helping people rather than, I think sometimes the problem with education is it becomes about the educator and how smart they appear. Whereas actually, I think both myself and Adam are pretty relatable because we're not those academic types, but maybe we're talking about some of that academic content.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to keep it relevant to the person that you're speaking to, and you're hoping that they're going to learn. So what in terms of that paper that you mentioned from the biopsychosocial side, could you give me an overview of what skills you think that are important around that?
Yeah, so we broke it down in that paper, and that was a paper I wrote with Peter Stilwell and Joe Gibson and Sabrina Connix, and we published that 2022. So we wrote it over the pandemic, and that's already got, I think, nearly 70 citations. So that's not bad for a paper in the last 2 years. Hopefully it's my first 100 citation first author paper to boost my academic fragile ego. And so the point of that was splitting it up, this biopsychosocial model, into this medical side of things where we use it as a diagnostic model. And then the other side of it is actually, well, to work with the biopsychosocial model, you also need to think about that from a human perspective. If you can't talk to people, if they don't trust you, if you can't relate to them, they are not going to give you the information, and they're not going to have that trust that enables you to bring that wider, broader medical model, that broader biopsychosocial model into the realm. So it's totally about communication. It's, how we build those connections, how we, and actually we called it a humanistic model. At its core, it was a humanistic model that's saying, well, actually, having pain sucks. It affects all these areas of your life, and sometimes people just need to be able to talk about it, have someone to relate to. And what's the biggest complaint of medicine always? They didn't listen to me. And that's one of those classic things that we were trying to address within that paper. So talking about, was it James you were talking about?
James Calder, yes.
Yeah. I think I saw that post maybe on LinkedIn. And, again, if you look at the grades that people need to get into physio or medicine or whatever, you might pick people who are very scientific, they are very accurate, and they are very fastidious, and they're wonderful, skills that they have. But then there is the other side of it, which great doctors also have, which is just relating to people, and being able to make people feel heard, being able to build trust, being able to communicate effectively with people. Those are the skills that are not assessed. Those are the skills that are not always championed. And that kind of is exactly what we talk about in the biopsychosocial paper.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting thing. And it's the same with physios. Like in my mind, it's not surprising to me that we've recruited sports therapists or rehabbers over physios, because I think sometimes it's the same thing with physios where the academic grades they're high, whereas I feel like we've got more rounded people that we really need as a company, or I really value as the company owners. We are relating to clients. How do we add value, communication, all of those things. So I think is beyond from the doctor perspective, I think the wider community is really important for that to be addressed across the board for it. And I know that's a broad statement, but that's my experience of it, is that physios can be more difficult to deal with than sports therapists or rehabbers, and whether that is because they're smarter than me or whatever it is, that's just my experience.
Yeah, look, and I think we should always go back to the individual, and I think there are individuals who are fantastic in all fields, and then individuals who are not so fantastic in all fields. But if you are working with people, communicating with people, I think you have to be aware that is part of the job, and those are skills that need to be championed. And they're not even just work skills; they're life skills, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? If you just, being a nice geezer down the pub is not a bad skill to have, to some degree. Being able to get on with people and have, good conversations and listen, and not come across as a bit of a, knowledgeable dick, if you like. I think there's, regardless of if you're a plumber, a tennis coach, a sports therapist, a doctor, a surgeon, whatever, I think these are positive humanistic skills. And I always say to people, imagine someone that who is a really great communicator and makes you feel good, and think about what are the skills that they display. And we see that with sales, don't we? People who are good at selling cars or furniture or whatever, generally they are good at communicating with people. And I think that's such a wonderful skill.
No, I agree with that as well. And I think in terms of that communication, like you mentioned, sales and that side of it, and sometimes sales is seen as, oh, they're selling something, but it all, for me, comes down to trust. Essentially, we're a sales company, but it's about trust, and it's about believing it. And it's like, certainly for long-term gains, if you're going to be, well, I've been doing it 18 years, I would hope that people trust my communication, and you'll be honest with them about things as well, in terms of how, and that's the same for literally, as you were saying, anything is, you need to have that trust to have any sort of longevity.
Yeah, I think that again, it's what do you value? And I think as a company owner, maybe you get to, have a say on that ethos, and you get to pick people that are, skilled in those areas. And if I was employing people, I would probably pick as much on personality and communication as your ability to teach an exercise, as your ability to do manual therapy. Just because I think, sometimes actually it's a harder skill to teach people to be a decent person, isn't it? So I do believe sometimes you are or you are not. And I do think that we need to value it as a skill. I think that we also need to champion it as a skill as well, rather than just the academic side of stuff.
Yeah, no, and I think in terms of whether someone's, say, good or bad, I mean, I'm always, if anyone's really bad, I'm sure there's definitely some bad people, but I think it's trying to harness, like we've got the younger people coming through now, people talk about work rates and all of that, but all it is we just need a different way of motivating them and understanding them better to be able to buy into what you're doing. And I think it's how stuff's positioned and getting them bought into culture or whatever it is, rather than just saying you need to work harder, you need to do more, you need whatever it is like, that's probably not going to be motivational to anyone, whereas actually explaining why you're doing something and why that's important to you, and get their perspective on it. I think that's what drives actions ultimately.
Yeah, and again, I think that's probably a mark of you guys, because you are looking at the problem, you're analysing the problem, you're trying to see how that problem is unfolding. Otherwise, what we do is we just expect of the next generation what was expected of us. How do things move forward? How do things change? So look, I don't think that we should totally kind of say what do you need as a generation, but it's certainly a little bit of a give and take, and to understand that things do change, and that actually to get the most out of people, you probably need to change a little bit as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing that you've mentioned a couple of times is that you like to simplify it and make it easy, which again I think is something that a lot of times isn't always done, where people may talk very scientifically or whatever it may be, and it's like, yeah, great that you know that, but ultimately I'm certainly someone that I just want it the most basic, simplistic thing. So is that
Yeah.
something that you've chosen to do, or is that just because that's the way you learn, or how do you, what made you come up or use that methodology?
Well, I think probably because I'm reasonably simple myself would probably be the best point. But I think that there has always been those educators who make things where they use knowledge as a commodity, in the sense that I'm smart, you're not. You need to bow in front of me because I know these fancy words. It's the classic, education ivory tower ego type of thing. And I'll be honest, I always hated that. And I think actually, if we are learner focused, we are meeting people where they are at. And I think we talk about this a lot in the rehab world with education and exercise and whatever, is meeting people where they are. And I think that we don't always do that educationally, certainly not in the kind of, physio rehab space that often it is that kind of, I know this, I'm up here, you're down there, you need to kind of bow in front of me and that type of stuff. Whereas actually, I just want to kind of say, here's all this complex stuff. This is actually what it really means. If we break it down, if we take away all the fancy words, that just means knee pain. Or if we take away all the fancy words, that just means it's flared up. And for some people that might be dumbing it down. For some people that might not appeal to them. They want that highfalutin PhD stuff. But for me, I think there's a great value in doing that for those people that probably need it the most, because the people that gravitate towards that kind of higher echelons of academia, they're going to go there anyway, aren't they? It's actually how do we meet these people at the bottom sometimes and raise the floor that I think is more powerful than how do we get further and further into that, information stratosphere.
Yeah. So I guess that is where you're being authentic to who you are and how you learn. And then, like you were saying, we've got other people that will be doing that element of it. So how important is that authenticity from your side for when you're delivering or even receiving information?
Oh, so my friend said to me, he said, I love hearing about heavy neuroscience in a hard Cockney accent. So, which always tickles me. So look, I mean, how important is authenticity? I only do authenticity really because, I only have one mode, which is kind of me, if that makes sense. So from my perspective, I suppose I don't have any airs and graces and an ability to go anywhere else. So it's only kind of, you see what you get. But when it comes to people liking what you do, I think that does appeal to them because you're not, you can see that you're not trying to be any smarter than you are. I don't profess to have a fancy PhD or be a professor. I'm just a guy who reads a lot, enjoys education, and along the way has done some stuff that has kind of been pretty cool. And it's appealed to some people. So from that sense, I suppose there is only authenticity. And I think Adam does that as well. If you're going to say if you look at Adam, you get what you see. Do you know what I mean? He gives you good, honest, clinical information that doesn't have too many airs and graces. And for both of us, and I think that's why the project has worked, we just stick to that. We don't try and be any more than that.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. And when I had one of these chats with Adam, I enjoyed him saying that and you mentioned it earlier on about having fun while you're doing it as well, because a lot of the time it does feel to be quite intense environments, and there's, yeah.
Yeah, well, look, I always say when I teach, I have a funny little joke, or I say, has anyone read this paper? And then I say, something like, well, it probably only after you've finished Netflix, because reading an academic paper, who does that mostly? I do it a lot because it's kind of my career and where I go now. But for your average person, it's boring as hell, isn't it? On a Saturday night, you don't sit in the bath and think, oh my God, I'm going to read that latest paper from JOSPT. Most people think I'm going to light some candles, read a novel, and then sit with my wife and drink some red wine. And where people like me and Adam fill the gap is we probably do a little bit of that for people, and then try and break it down into a way that isn't too crazy in getting it across. So I would call myself probably a knowledge translator, if anything, which I think is really important, because I think the gap between your average clinician and the world of academia is actually getting a bit wider these days rather than closer.
Yeah, well, why do you think that is the case then?
Well, because I just think there's so much information that comes out. I just think that it's its own world, isn't it? Academia and academic publishing. I don't think it's done always to increase knowledge. I think it's done because it's the merry-go-round of academia. And I was having a chat with my good friend Steve Camper, who does a lot of stuff for the JOSPT, etc. And he said to me, Ben, I don't think research is really meant to be read by clinicians. It's not really written to be read, and that's why he's done a big series in JOSPT breaking down all this complex terminology and making it simpler. Because I think sometimes it drives the merry-go-round of the academic world, and that's fine. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that the average clinician is always, even the paywall. The fact that you cannot even get research, that you have to pay for it, and your average clinician will not pay 50 quid for a paper. Even from that sense, that shows in essence it's not made for clinicians. It's made for the academic world that has these subscriptions to these academic, people involved in that world. They have subscriptions to this stuff. Your average clinician's a bit locked out, aren't they?
Yeah, yes, and yet there's so much derived and value put on research. I think that is the one question that we get asked when we're presenting on anything is, all right, mate, go on then, tell us, this is it, nurse is it. Go on, mate, what's the research on this? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want the answer. I'm saying he, but it could be anyone. But that's a very common thing that we may see. So what's your experience of that? Because I fully agree with what you're saying. It's its own industry, and great, good luck. Universities are amazingly impressive, but they're businesses, aren't they, really?
Yeah, well, yes, but they are business with, that it's not trickle down economics all the time, is it? It doesn't trickle down always to your average clinician. But, I think people are always like, but people they want to know what's the research because I don't know if they really want to know what the research is, or if they want to know if or if they want to kind of you to prove what you're saying. Because 9 times out of 10, most people don't know the entirety of the research on any subject, if that makes sense. And for every paper that says one thing, there's a paper that says something else anyway, a lot of the time. But even then, they're kind of, you have people that, there's knowledge, and again we use knowledge to batter them down. Well, how many people are in that paper, how many, what did they do, and trying to deconstruct everything. And again, it's just using knowledge as a bit of a battering ram, whereas actually we should be building bridges and celebrating each other because we have some good stuff to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, my perspective actually, when they ask that question, is that they want to be seen to be asking that question in front of their colleague, where
what does it say about them?
Yeah, no, but I think that is another thing which I think your project is really important for. Is like, look, guys, we know it's a serious topic, medicine, rehab, all of that, but it doesn't need to be on all the time. It's like you can enjoy it while you're doing it, and it's.
So we have like a private Facebook page of about 1,500, 2,000 people. And I can honestly say we've never had a shitty conversation in there once, or, you know, we've never had two people kicking off at each other, because that's just not what we're about. We just wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't encourage it. We wouldn't tolerate it. That's not what we want for our community. We want people just to have some conversations and share some information. And if you do want to, you can disagree, certainly, but I don't want to see people say, can you prove that? And can you know, because that's not what it's about. And there are never definitive answers anyway.
And so, yeah, in terms of like that challenging things, because I think challenge is healthy, isn't it? You should be able to challenge things,
Yeah.
as long as it's done in the right way. Like, what's your thoughts on being open to challenge?
Yeah, look, I always say actually disagreement is foundational for science, isn't it? If we didn't disagree with things, we wouldn't test things, we wouldn't research things. But the problem is why do we disagree? Is it because it challenges our own notions, you know? And so often I think it challenges our egos and it challenges the way that we work. And sometimes these disagreements aren't coming out of you know, a real desire for knowledge. Often it's because it challenges some fundamental part of what we thought we knew. It challenges our business practices, you know, and they're the real problems. It's okay to disagree, totally. But it's doing it in a way that I think reflects positive disagreement, not just I don't agree with that because I thought that I knew that and now I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, no, how much do you think fear plays a part in that response?
Yeah, I think for some people, definitely, you know, the challenges of new information that come out challenge working practice. They challenge methods. They challenge, you know, these things that we hold dear. You know, it creates that element of cognitive dissonance, doesn't it? You know, look, I don't want to get on top of anyone, but it might be that I use therapeutic ultrasound and now I realize, well, actually, I don't need to turn it on because it works just as well. And it might be that that could be challenging for someone that's used that for the last 25 years, right? But you know, I suppose that there has to be an element of the truth is the truth, or what we know right now is important. But it's that I think we should all have a bit of a mindset that things change and we hold things pretty loosely along the way, because, you know, even what I've seen in the last 20, 25 years, all sorts of stuff have changed. And, you know, if you get hurt by everything that changes, you're going to be, you know, permanently in a state of discombobulation.
Yeah, no, I think it is that if someone's really strong opinionated on something, fair enough. But yeah, like you say, there's the things change, they can change quite quickly and quite dramatically, and then they might go back to it.
Well, an example I use is, would you, you know, if you had a heart surgeon, would you still want them to cut you from the top of your chest down to your stomach and tear your heart, you know, your chest open? Or do you want them to go up through the groin with the little robot and, right? And so things change. I had 4 gears on my first car and windy windows. My biceps were much bigger. But, you know, now I've got all these airbags and 6 gears and electric windows and, you know, so things change. And I think we do have to appreciate that and go with it, whether that's, you know, medicine or, you know, any type of technique. AI is going to be the new one, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's literally changing every hour, let alone
Yeah,
every day.
exactly. And it scares the hell out of me because I don't understand it. But I'm just waiting for my moment to see when does it really kind of come into my life and into my world. I'm open to it. I just need to know when is the right moment.
Yeah. So from a general business perspective, what are the key lessons do you think that clinicians should be aware of?
Well, I think certainly from a business perspective, I think that I've learned that that it's more about sales than knowledge. You know, and it's more about the illusion of knowledge sometimes. So look, I think the big thing in business that everyone needs to realize is it's about consistency. Whether it's consistency of social media, whether it's consistency of marketing, whether it's consistency of building and making connections. If you're not consistent, if you're not doing things regularly that are moving your business forward, you're going to have a problem. And I think one of the things is, it's, you know, what's the classic book, The E-Myth Revisited? You can be a really, really good clinician, but you may not be great at running a physio practice, or you may not be great at running an educational business, because they are not always the same skill sets. So knowledge is good. And in the business of knowledge, knowledge is definitely good. But then there is also a business side to that. And I think one of those keys is learning about things that work, things that don't for you, and then being consistent with them over time.
Yeah, no, I think it's dead right in terms of that as well, and just maintaining it. And you might update those things, but ultimately driving activity with it.
I think social media is the best example. Is people start off by posting about their business 10 times a day for the first week, and then it's like 10 times in the next month, and then it's 10 times in a year, and that consistency drops off, and it drops off, and it drops off. And it's, you know, maybe they didn't start with a clear, consistent plan. Maybe they didn't start out saying, well, I'm going to post once a day or once every other day and stick to that. And it's just, you know, it's, look, running a business is quite repetitive and boring in some ways, isn't it? It's work. You know, it's not fireworks and fun. You know, we have to create content, we have to film it, we have to upload it and watch the circles go round and round, and we have to do some social media stuff. And it's boring as hell, but it's part of running the business, you know, and it's just doing those things again and again and again. But then we do some fun stuff, like have some meals and some laughs and some jokes, meet some new people, have some guests. So being consistent and doing doing that stuff very regularly and doing it well. But then also, you know, when you do get an opportunity to laugh, do something different, embracing that as well.
Yeah, I was reading a book recently, and the guy said that basically to love your job, you need to love 20% of it, and the rest is just necessary, whatever, you know, sat by your laptop. Like there's no getting away from that realistically if you're trying to do anything.
No, well, I hear that about social media all the time, you know. So I think that my career path has definitely improved with things like social media. You people have access to your ideas, right? You have access and an ability to make your ideas heard. And that's brilliant. I think that's done wonders for me. Do you know what I mean? I think 20 years earlier, that none of that would have happened for me. But at the same point, there isn't, people say, oh, I don't have any ideas, or oh, I couldn't be bothered, and they don't get the benefits. So, you know, there is the benefit to it, but then there is also the hard work, monotonous, just doing it part. And I think people think sometimes, especially entrepreneurship, is meant to be all like, you know, sitting on the beach. And actually, it's, my friend said it the best to me, it's working out which 18 hours of the day that you work. That's your choice. What's the best 18 hours of the day for you to work, right? And, you know, it's for all of the fun and the freedom and these type of things, it's also got its massive boring sides and, you know, stress and where, you know, things going down and things going up and the fucking manic depression and, you know, these type of things.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you do know exactly what I'm talking. You have you have that mania where this is amazing, everything's brilliant. You know, this time next year, Rodney. And then you have those days where it's just like nothing is happening and it's just boring as hell, and you're like, ugh, you know. So
yeah, and it's only a couple of times a day I have those ups and downs. Only a couple.
Exactly. It's only twice a day I have both mania and depression. And I suppose also to terms with that, isn't it? I think, you know, you're always looking for the win, and actually wins don't happen every day. You have to kind of just settle into the monotony as well.
Yeah. How do you manage that then? Like the ups and downs, like how do you deal with it if you're having a low point?
Badly. Yeah, badly. No, I don't know. I think you go through again, you have those great periods where everything's going right and it's brilliant. And then you have those other periods where the thing about, I think, running business is the low times are probably what you enjoy when you're employed, when it's quiet and you can just get on with life, and that's brilliant. When you run a business, it's a bit like, well, why is it slow? Why is it quiet? And just learning to come to terms with, you know, I'm great at telling other people about it and helping them manage it. I'm terrible at doing it myself.
Yeah, no, I think that's quite a good way of looking at it. Actually, is yeah, the low points are the bits you enjoy when you're employed.
Of course
Maybe,
they are, because it's like
yeah,
chilling out. I don't
yeah.
have to do a lot of work today.
You definitely got the wrong people if they're. If, I'm sure. I don't think my guys think like that. But anyway, yeah, I know what you mean. I've
Yeah.
definitely been like that in previous things on there. So that's. I mean, that leads into like that the work-life balance, whatever that piece of it. What's your perspective on that?
It'd be brilliant if you could find it, wouldn't it? It would be like Nirvana. It would be like Shangri-La. So look, I'll travel, like, so let's take September. I taught a course in Cyprus. I did a conference in Denmark. I taught a course in Germany. I taught a course in New York. And then I taught a course somewhere else. I can't remember. I did 5 or 6 weeks of every weekend and a couple of times in the week traveling. And tough. And it's tough. You're in different beds, you're in hotel rooms. And I suppose you just have to realize that it's part of the job, and hopefully you couldn't do it all the time, but because it would literally kill you. But I think that's what the experience teaches you, how to manage that a little bit better. But I don't think running your own business or being entrepreneurial, you ever find that perfect balance. If you're too quiet, you're stressed. If you're too busy, you're stressed, and then you never quite find the middle ground anyway.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would agree. I would agree with that one as well. And I think I think even I still think it's so, like we were talking about being overwhelmed before and different things, that
Yeah,
there's so much knowledge, data, podcasts, YouTube,
yeah.
social media, email, calls, WhatsApp. There's no escape from it really. So it's almost like how you embrace it rather than, I think the 9 to 5 stuff, I think it's kind of already done to some extent, because you're not waiting for a letter like you used to get 40 years ago or whatever it is now. It's like it's there constantly. WhatsApp, everyone WhatsApps you, don't they? That's not a
Oh,
sanctuary anymore.
I think the two that I used to communicate quite a lot by Facebook Messenger. Now it's WhatsApp. I hardly get email. Well, I get loads of emails, but I would say if people want to contact me, mostly they will do it through some form of social media these days. They'll drop
Yeah.
me a message. The amount of course invites I get by people dropping me a message on Instagram, for example, that 5 years ago they'd have emailed me, but now sometimes I wonder, why am I not getting loads of emails? But it's because I've got a ton of Instagram messages that are doing the same thing.
Yeah, and then even like bringing all that into like remembering, like, where have they messaged me? I know I've been messaged.
That happens to me all the time. Where is this message that someone sent me? Absolutely. And I'm checking through, and because there's about 35 different places that you can get a message these days, and that's challenging within itself.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that isn't great, really, because it's like you just have got no escape from it. It's like you constantly are on from it. And it's, again, I agree that you're never ever going to be, I'm never going to be fully switched off from it. But it is important to have time when you are just not on it, because if you could be on your phone all the time.
Yeah, no, look, I totally, well, I've got, actually, I'll show you. And this is a bit of not product placement, but I bought a box and I lock my phone away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so because I realized that if I have it next to me, I will fiddle with it. And I worked out that the only way to really change the habit is to lock it away. Put a timer on it and I put it upstairs.
Right. And how has that helped?
And it's not bad. Well, I mean, you can have access to all channels on other devices, but yeah, I definitely reckon it's helped me be able to say I'm going to have an hour off this, no social media, because my social media goes off I've got, I don't know, 60 odd thousand followers on Insta and 30 odd on Twitter and Facebook, etc. So there's a lot of people that are connected with me, and there's a lot of alerts and things. And I just want a break. I just need to get away from it, and it works. Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's good. I might bear
it's
that
better
one in
than will.
mind.
It's better than willpower. There's nothing like trying to rely on willpower to change a habit. It will never work.
Yeah. I wasn't even considering trying to use my
No,
willpower on that.
exactly. I always thought I'll just put it down and I won't touch it. That's absolute rubbish.
Yeah, and so finally, what would your advice be to clinicians, either people working now or people that are just starting out in their journey?
So look, I mean, from an educational perspective, I think that it's kind of, as you said before, there's so much information out there that it is overwhelming. The amount of research alerts that I get, and in fact, I don't even look at them anymore. I don't even look at the thing that they're meant to do, which is alert me, just because I cannot be bothered. So I think that learning a bit more about how to filter is really important these days. Like when I went to university, there just wasn't the access to the information in the same way there is now. And so the challenge educationally today is to sort the wheat from the chaff, is to find out what is any good, because there's 5 trillion papers published a minute or something ridiculous. And I think from a business perspective, it's learning how to channel what you're good at and what your passion is into something that works. And for some people, that might be running a practice. For other people, it might be working for a sports team. For another person, it might be being an educator. But I think that another thing that I want people to realize is that in your life, you can have different phases. Just because you're a clinician doesn't mean you always have to be a clinician. And what I hear a lot about with educators is it's like, oh, how many patients does Ben see? Well, Ben's seen a lot of patients in his time. He doesn't see as many as he used to, but he's seen quite a few. And I think there's this idea that if you're a clinician, you're a clinician, or you're this, and and actually follow your dreams, do what you want, follow your path. The only person you have to justify that is to yourself and your family, and do things that interest you. Why should you have to be the same at 18 or 21 or 25 as you are at 65? What a boring life that would be. And I think that's the most important thing for people to realize. If they're interested in different areas, pursue them. Variety is the spice of life. And if you enjoy it, go for it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just finally on that from my side is, I think that people do get pigeonholed and given, oh, this is who I am. I'm a physio, I'm a sports scientist, I'm a sports therapist. And that they do almost, that is weaponized or clung onto by a lot of people who define themselves by it. And it's like, who cares really? It's depending on what you're trying to achieve. Obviously, if you're practicing, you need to have the relevant experience and qualification, but ultimately we're all people.
Yeah, just just do what you follow. Just don't listen to, what's the saying? Don't take advice from people. Don't take criticism from people you wouldn't go to for advice. And I think that's learning to filter out all of those opinions and voices is also a powerful skill, and just being a little single-minded.
Great. No, well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's just, I'm enjoying seeing all like the knowledge and files you've got in the background. That's, I'm kind of like visualizing that's a representative of your brain as well.
Oh, no. These are records, buddy.
Oh, right.
So this is all, I've been mixing and DJing since like the early 90s. And I just went and picked up a load of records from a friend of mine, about 2,000 records from the early 90s. So not files, and they need to get filed away. But yeah, that's my other world when I used to be fun and hip and young and cool. And
Well, my fiance, who's a lot younger than me, she was saying, she was talking about vinyls, and I know she didn't have a clue what she was talking about.
yeah.
But it's like, yeah, that is a vinyl. I'll show her this.
Yeah, look, that's not vinyls, mate. That is a lot of vinyls, boxes and
That
boxes
is,
of them.
yeah. And then actually, no, one last question. You mentioned about boxing. Who's your favorite boxer?
Oh, so my favorite boxer of all time is Joe Calzaghe. Love Joe Calzaghe. What skills, what movement, what hands, the way he pressured people, but you counter punch, very beautiful. So Calzaghe is my favorite fighter of all time.
Yeah, I remember the Jeff Lacey fight. That was unbelievable.
2006. Yeah, I remember that, where he just spun him. Bing, 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 spun him round. Bang, bang, bang. That was probably the most one-sided world title beating I've ever seen. Because Jeff Lacey was the mini Mike Tyson, wasn't he?
He was favourite Lacey, wasn't he, going into that fight?
Yeah. Well, and Calzaghe had some injuries, and I've actually got that on VHS.
Right.
Yeah, so I remember that fight. Just what a masterclass of amazing, skillful. The way he used to hit you like 5 times and then turned you, and then I think I remember Lacey just going around in circles with his eyes out here. What a fight!
Yeah, no, I
Probably
remember
my
that. I remember
favourite Kawasaki fight of all time.
I remember going home from a night out, had been out in Manchester, and I think it was on ITV, and it was on at 2
Yeah, it
a.m.,
was.
wasn't it? There, it was like, it was really just because I
Oh,
always
that was
get a
in the
bit
UK.
nervous.
It was the UK fight.
Yeah, it
It
was, but I
wasn't
think
out
it
in
was still on
America. Yeah.
American TV, wasn't it, for it?
And the other fight that I saw was Kessler Kawasaki at the Millennium Stadium. So we went down from London to the Millennium Stadium,
Oh,
and
you went to the
Kawasaki
fight.
Kessler. Yeah,
Nice.
what a fight that was. And that must have been 2007 or 2008.
Yeah, I think
Just
it was
amazing.
seven that, oh seven.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was epic, wasn't it? Because Kessler was
Yeah.
a top quality
Oh,
fighter.
amazing.
Tough man.
And he was and he had those 2 fights with Froch. What a tough man. Yeah.
Mm. Great. All right. No, look, I appreciate that. Thank you for your insight and sharing it. And good luck sorting out the record collection.
Yeah, I've been doing it very slowly. I've got about halfway through, actually. So we'll get there.
Brilliant. Cheers, Ben. Thanks for your time.